This time, when Jaco arrived on Namek, he was recognized. The Galactic Patrol had an outpost on the planet now, so the Namekians knew who he was and had a pretty good idea of what he was there for. He'd say a quick hello to his fellow officers as well as Elder Mori before taking off in the direction of Guru's place. When he arrived, he'd seen Nail out front training a Namekian he'd eventually recognized as Piccolo's reincarnation. He was surprised he'd grown so quickly, but apparently that was just the way with Warrior Clan Namekians. To his surprise, Piccolo recognized him. You're one of the people who fought my father. He'd probably want me to kill you. There was a slightly tense silence before Piccolo backed down. But I'm my own person. Really, I should thank you. This place suits me better than Earth. That said, he couldn't say he wasn't curious about Earth, and he'd like to visit someday. Nail and Piccolo led him through to see Guru. He'd greet the Elder, who already knew what he was here for. So, you're ready for me to unlock your potential? I am now. How did your fight go? I lost. Really? Well, this should be helpful. Guru placed his hand on Jaco's head, and he felt new energy swirling around inside him as his strength grew. But how strong would Jaco get after this? As I said in the second or first part of this story, Jaco has a power level of about 400. Now, Krillin got about 8.5 times stronger from the potential unlock, going from a level of 1,500 to 13,000. So for Jaco, 400 times 8.5 would be 3,200. But that was just the initial boost. Remember, as Krillin continued to fight on Namek, he rose to a power level of 75,000. So he got about 50 times stronger all told. So eventually, Jaco will wind up with a power level of 20,000. But as for now, he reaches the level of 3,200, and of course is still weaker than Nail, but he's quite powerful by Galactic Patrol standards. Speaking of, Jaco would return to work, which was never that difficult for him and was now even easier with his newfound power. As for Cymbal, he finished his Galactic Patrol training within a year and he'd grown quite a lot stronger, reaching a power level of around 800. But as a new officer, he was assigned a more experienced partner, and lo and behold, he wound up partnered with Jaco, since Jaco was the guy who recruited him in the first place. Jaco and Cymbal initially didn't get along all that well, but they found they worked together quite well. They trained together fairly frequently. Mostly due to Guru, Jaco reached a power level of 20,000, and due to training with him, Cymbal reached a power level of 2,400. Jaco would also receive a bigger ship to accommodate both of them. Cymbal was still only a member of the Galactic Patrol because he wanted to find Namek eventually, but he didn't mind his work either. On Earth, things go more or less the same. Goku and Chi-Chi still have Gohan, and they still name him Gohan, but this time he gets to meet Grandpa Gohan, who is honored that Goku named his son after him. I just said Gohan way too many times. Jaco would hear all about it from Goku over the radio, and one day he was invited to meet up with everyone at Kame House to come and meet Gohan, but he couldn't get the time off. Still, he could think of an excuse to go. Respectfully, sir, you can't just blow off work to see your friends. We aren't. Jaco pulled up a display on the ship's console. Look at that, a Frieza Force pod headed in the direction of Earth. Who knows, maybe that's where it's headed. And while we're intercepting it, we can visit everybody. The mutant Namekian sighed. He really couldn't argue with that. From what he'd heard, these Frieza Force people were trouble. They probably should make sure they weren't headed to Earth. As they got closer, they would quickly realize that it was indeed headed for Earth, so they'd follow it. Raditz would land in the same field as he always does and is found by the same farmer. Before the farmer tries to shoot Raditz, however, Jaco would land, catching the attention of both of them.
The Galactic Patrol! This complicates things.
Jaco and Cymbal both stepped out of the ship, and the farmer decided to just run while the aliens were distracted. You're trespassing on this planet, Saiyan. Clear off or we'll have no choice but to place you under arrest. Raditz would stare blankly at the pair of officers. Were they serious? Cymbal would step forward as Raditz checked his scouter, a power level of 2,400. There was no way that was right for a Galactic Patrol officer, his scouter must be broken. Though his confidence was a little shaken, he'd still resolved to take him on. He'd rush forward, trying to punch Cymbal, who caught his fist before retaliating with a punch of his own. At Kame House, Goku had just arrived and was introducing Gohan to the group when he sensed the fight going on. Two energies bigger than he'd ever felt going at it. One of them felt somewhat familiar, but he didn't recognize the other one. So, of course, he had to find out what was going on. Even if he wasn't really strong enough to contend in a fight like this himself, he had to see. He'd leave Gohan under the care of Krillin, Bulma, and Roshi before taking off to investigate on the Nimbus. When he got there, he'd see Cymbal fighting a man in strange armor, who seemed to recognize him.
Wait, Kakarot?
This causes a halt to the fight, which Raditz was grateful for as he was losing. Kako, what? Goku scratched his head, unsure who he was talking about. I assume that's your Saiyan name, Goku. So, big guy, how do you know him? Jaco would answer. Remember, Goku knows he isn't human already in this timeline.
He's my younger brother. He was sent here to destroy all life on this planet and prepared for sale.
Well, I don't remember anything like that, but I'd never do something so horrible.
That still doesn't explain why you're here.
Cymbal kept his guard up in case he tried anything.
I was here to recruit my brother, but I'm guessing he's not going to come.
This hadn't gone to plan, and now he was pretty sure he was about to get arrested. But that smaller officer hadn't done much yet, and he didn't look all that impressive. He figured the taller one must be the muscle. He'd rush forward and attempt to kick Jaco, who simply blocked it with one arm. As he backed up, he'd check his scouter.
Impossible! There's no way a shrimp like you can have a power level of 20,000!
Raditz would attempt to flee, but was caught in the back by Cymbal's electric shockwave, stopping him in his tracks. The Saiyan fell to the ground, and the group flew over to him. Jaco took some key-sealing handcuffs from the ship, restraining Raditz.
You may have beaten me, but the other two are even stronger than I am. When they get here in a year, none of you will survive.
Vegeta and Nappa, with their great ape forms, would be more than a match for these guys. And then he was sure they'd break him out of prison. They needed him, right? Cymbal took Raditz to the ship. Meanwhile, Jaco stopped to speak with Goku. They were trying to come up with a plan to prepare for the Saiyans in a year, if they actually arrived. Jaco would promise to come back and help everyone train once they'd brought Raditz in. On a faraway planet, Vegeta was honestly more amused than anything about Raditz getting himself arrested. He didn't really care about going to Earth, but a Galactic Patrolman with a power level of 20,000 was something he had to see. Surely Raditz's scouter was just busted. So he and Nappa would set off, headed for Earth. They don't know about the Dragon Balls, they're just going because, well, they have nothing better to do, and they do still want to sell the planet. As for Raditz, while he's alive here, he's looking at about 80 years in a Galactic Patrol prison. Most Saiyans don't even live much longer than 80, so it was essentially a life sentence. On Earth, Goku was trying to think of a way for him to improve. He'd done all he could as far as he knew, nobody else to train with. Jaco was strong, but he was hardly a good teacher, so what was there to do? He'd consult Kami about the issue, who paused to ponder the problem. He had one idea, but apparently it was a long shot if he'd even be allowed to do this. He'd bring Goku to Otherworld, approaching the desk of King Yama before explaining the situation.
I don't know. A living person in the world of the dead, it's highly irregular, not to mention dangerous for the individual.
King Yama scratched his beard.
You're absolutely sure this is necessary?
I wouldn't ask if it weren't.
Then, I suppose I can allow him to go. But if this goes wrong, it's on you. Since his body has to eat, he'll need to bring food along Snake Way.
So, Kami would have Mr. Popo prepare food, enough for Goku to last a few months. Dried goods mostly, it had to be shelf-stable. He couldn't exactly bring anything that might expire on the way. This gave Goku a day to head home. He'd swing by Kami's house and explain what was going on to Krillin, telling him to spread the word to everyone else. And then he'd collect Gohan before heading home. He'd explain what was happening to Chi-Chi, and while she wasn't exactly thrilled to be left alone for an entire year, she understood that it was necessary. These Saiyans did sound quite dangerous. Nobody knows about Gohan's hidden potential yet, he wasn't involved at all with the fight with Raditz, so for now he doesn't have to worry about it. Goku would leave to train with King Kai, though it took him a little longer to get there since he has to stop to sleep and eat while running along Snake Way. This means he's probably going to be a bit weaker by the time Vegeta and Nappa arrive. As for the humans, Jaco and Cymbal would be allowed to go to Earth to train them, officially declaring Earth Jaco's responsibility, so if anything went wrong, it was on him. Jaco, Kami, and Cymbal would take charge training everybody. Kami still wasn't the biggest fan of Jaco for taking the whole Piccolo Jr. thing into his own hands, and his feelings about Cymbal were obvious, but he put it aside for now. Despite this awkward atmosphere, Jaco found training quite educational. He wasn't going to ditch his blaster yet, but he learned how to use ki attacks properly. He didn't get much stronger, he wasn't training with people who could push him, but that didn't mean he didn't learn anything from the group. Everyone else did get stronger. Not stronger than Nappa, but strong enough to contend, and as for Cymbal, he reached the power level of 5,000. Goku has a little less time with King Kai, but he still learns the Kaioken and the Spirit Bomb, though his power level is about 7,000 instead of 8,000. Still, with Jaco and the others, he was confident they could stop the Saiyans. And that seems like a decent place to stop. So, Raditz is alive, he's just in jail. As for Vegeta and Nappa, thanks to Guru, Jaco is actually more powerful than Vegeta. But knowing that, how will the Saiyans try to win? Find out next time. Be sure to leave a comment and let me know what you think, or just say hi. Maybe subscribe if you want to, but that's completely optional. Anyway, that's all from me. Take care.